Welcome to our webinar of the one thing that motivates all people. It's a culture webinar designed for executives to get a deeper understanding of the one thing that motivates all people, which is VP culture. All right, so let's dive in. And we're going to first imagine ourselves here. So the whole purpose of this webinar is to equip you for this situation, okay? So you find yourself at this executive meeting, and maybe you are the CEO, or maybe you're the director of HR. At any rate, someone's looking to you for answers about how to develop your corporate culture. What are you going to say to them? What are the scientific methodologies that you think are important? Of course, you think people are important, and your intentions are great. But what are the methodologies that you're going to use? What's the case studies, the business case studies? There's always a skeptic going, why are we going to spend all this money on developing culture? What's the business case study for developing culture? So let's dive in. So I'm a researcher, and here's my primary research question. If you're going to build a culture, it has to be on the universal thing that motivates all people. Okay, so I've set out in my career to find out what that one thing is. And so generally, when I do this in a live situation, I toss this question out to the people and I say, what's the average employee says? And what do you think the first thing is out of their mouth? Of course, it's money. See, that's the universal motivator of all people is money. That's why we work, right? And then they think a little bit deeper and they say, no, it could be enjoyment too. And then they think even deeper. And then they get into, they want to accomplish something purposeful, a big dream. Okay, so those are usually the three general categories, the buckets of what's the one thing that motivates all people that I hear from audiences and from people who just spontaneously give answers off the top of their heads. So let's dive into that. And let's this whole hour here, we're going to be researching that interactively together. So let's look. We're going to be doing a work experiment. So people don't know this, but for the next hour, you're actually going to be doing this as a test to see if you could endure some form of work for pay. So if I gave you a penny a pump for the next hour, you could make like, I don't know, $32 in the next hour. And maybe if you did it this fast, you could make $72,000 a year. Would you do this every single day? 24 hours a day to make this much money? Is money what motivates us? And I put this app tester out there to see how motivated people are, and you'll find out that people really aren't that motivated by money. Usually money drops off the radar of motivation once things are fair. People are only demotivated when it's not fair. Okay, once it becomes like, yeah, I could live on this, then money goes by the side. Okay, so if money isn't the primary motivator, and I think we all know that instinctively, what is the primary motivator? Let's test this next thing. Enjoying work. Okay, first of all, he gets to enjoy a great haircut. This is Andre Agassi back in the 90s. He gets to play a game all day. If doing this is no fun, but maybe playing a ball competitively against somebody else is fun. And maybe when you show up with work like Andre Agassi did, he had 20,000 people cheering him on. Yay, he's here at work. We get to see him work. Awesome. What's not to enjoy about that? He gets millions of dollars. He gets to be the best in the world. He's number one in the world. He's won the U.S. Open, the Australian Open, the Open. If it's openable, he opened it. Okay, he won the Olympics. He was number one seed in the world, and he had this advice to say about enjoying work. He says, "You know what? Winning changes nothing." He says, "How can I have my own plane, be number one in the world, have a bank full of money, married to Brooke Shields, and still hate my job?" It was possible because something was not quite working. So let's move on to the next slide. All right. So if it's not that, what if it's the big dream? Okay. Let's look at the big dream as an option. Okay. So the big dream, this is me with the mullet and the mustache. And back in my 20s, I had big dreams. And I thought, maybe this will motivate me for the rest of my life. And there's something to this. So let's look into this because I was an artist. I thought, I could paint and do things, but I want to do something even bigger for life. Okay. And that bigger dream was that I actually wanted to go change the world. What greater dream could a kid have? So let's go change the world as a 20-year-old. Let's go to a foreign country and feed the poor, and motivate people. So that's what I did. And I got to tell this to my daughter too. My daughter had that 20-year-old angst too. She's in college. She was an art major, even better than I. And she said, "Dad, what do I do?" And and so I say to her, I'm like, I've got something to tell you about my big dream and how to approach this. And so let me tell you my story. So I told Ashley this story. It starts here at the Marathon Street, okay? And this is in Athens, Greece, where I was working overseas. And there's an actual street called Marathon Street because this is where the first marathon was run 2,500 years ago. It connects Athens to the city of Marathon. And there was an ancient runner who had been fighting for his life in the Battle of Marathon, and they defeated the world's largest superpower. They were the underdog, and he was running to the king of Athens. And he got to the king of Athens. He said, "We won. We accomplished the big dream." And then he died. And while I was going down the street on my little Euro scooter, I was dying too. Not because I had won, but because my dream was dying. I put down the visor on my helmet, not just to keep out the dark, smoggy air, but to scream a scream of despair that the dream that I thought would last that 20-year-old a lifetime died in 3 short months when my dreams met my manager. And while I was feeding the poor on the streets here, I was having shame shoved down my throat at our staff meetings. You're not good enough. You're not fast enough. You're not staying up late enough. You're not raising up money. I did more when I was your age. I did it in the jungles. You're doing it in this modern European cities. So I was never enough. I felt inadequate, disconnected, in despair. And I'm not alone. What do we tell the Ashleys of the world? What do we tell those Randalls? Just have a big dream. Just pump. It's just about money. Just find some money. Or maybe you'll enjoy it. Maybe painting you'll enjoy it. Maybe if you change your major, you'll enjoy it. I hope you'll enjoy it. What do we tell them? There's this crisis in the workforce. Nobody is really focused on the one thing that motivates all people. In fact, the average team looks like this. If 10 were on the team, 3 of them will be polling. Like if it was a tug of war, 3 would be polling. Okay. And then the other 5 would just be kind of hanging on that tug of war rope and not pulling anywhere unless the boss comes around. Oh, look, pull. And then when he's gone, it's like, oh, Facebook. And they're called disengaged workers, according to Gallup. So 50% are that way. And then there's another 2%, 20% they're disgruntled. They're upset with the workplace. They're like, I'm not even going to pull at all. In fact, you guys shouldn't pull either. This place sucks. So that's what the average workforce, with 70% people ranging from disengaged to pissed off at the workplace. That's average. So some of these people are in your workforce, okay? Some of these people, and the average thing looks like this: 70% disengaged, 18% working against the organization. And look at this one: 1 day a week lost in productivity. So that's our first indication that there's some productivity going on here. When employees are disengaged, you might as well send them home for 1 day a week. They feel disengaged. They're not getting their job done. They don't want to do their job. Then Gen Z, 75% have quit a job already for emotional reasons. And we think, oh, they just don't know what they're talking about. They've only been in the workforce for 6 months. But maybe they know better than everyone else. Maybe they just haven't given up on finding something that actually works. So we've got this crisis. And we haven't answered the question. This research question still stands. What's the one thing that motivates all people? And I found out a problem in my research, that I was asking everybody this question, and they were all answering it with their left brains. Like, maybe it's this, maybe I could try that, maybe it's that. And try to calculate with their left brains, would it be worth it? But when I ask people their right brains this question slightly differently, the research turns on its head. I find everyone knows what the answer to this question is. Universally, I speak in crowds, and people all answer in a second. I could see it on their faces that they know the answer to this question. And here's how I pose this question differently, and to get at the core of this research, okay? I call this the eternity question. If you could choose just one thing for all eternity, what would you choose? So I say, let's pretend we open up a sci-fi portal to eternity, and you get to take one thing from this earth through that portal, and it has to satisfy you for all eternity. That's a pretty heavy ask for this one thing, okay? So I put up those things that we were throwing around, and I say, well, what if you had money alone? You could go on Amazon and just buy things all day long, but that's all you get, money to buy stuff, okay? Maybe the next thing is like enjoyment alone. You get to pick a game: tennis, fishing, mountain biking, whatever it is. You get to do that one thing forever. I hope you enjoy it. Or you could accomplish the big dream. You get to pick one project and work on that for all eternity, and making it bigger and better and bigger and better and bigger and better. I hope you enjoy that for all eternity. Or I offer you number 4. Those you could be surrounded by those who care and value you for all eternity. Which would you choose? 1, 2, 3, or 4? And you know what? Universally, because you know the answer to this question. People 99% choose number 4 immediately. I see it on their faces and they all go, yes, that one. I want that more than anything else in the world. And why is that? It's because valuing people is at the core of what motivates all people universally all over the world. Whenever I speak, people stand up when I say, did you pick number 4? The whole crowd stands up. Welders, CEO, frontline workers, managers, leaders, followers. We all want to feel valued, and our right brain knows that this would last us for all eternity and motivate our hearts and our minds and our bodies to do life. It's the one thing that we want more than anything else. It's universal. It ignites our bodies and our brains. Okay, this is key because we're going to dig into the neuroscience of this. Because why do you answer so quickly? Because your body has experienced it and you just know, and your mind just knows immediately. People go, yes, being valued by others is what I want. That would motivate me. I could last forever with that compared to anything else. This is the only thing that people will answer that question for. In fact, science confirms it. They've done studies all over the world. They've asked people the same thing, and over 7,000 respondents said the same thing. They want to be surrounded by those who care and value them. I call this the very operating system of culture. It's the operating system of humanity. It's the very thing that drives us more than anything else. We are wired to be valued by others and to value others. Okay? This is the core operating system that runs people. Okay? It's a great metaphor, but that leads me to that other question. If everyone knows this, if I can lead everyone to that and they all go, yes, that's what I want, why do we have 70% of people who are still unmotivated? Don't they know what they really want? Well, it's kind of because we have these two paths in the workplace that we take. And the path that leads the 70% away is a culture, what I call commodity culture, where people, the organization, everything's about getting a thing done, a process done. It's not really about people. It's not about being valued. It's about making stuff, money, or something else. And it drives people to wither. That 70% just don't see it. They can't feel it. They're going down this pathway. But there's another more hopeful pathway that we'll explore in a little bit called VP culture. VP stands for valuing people, a culture where people feel valued. Okay? So we'll explore that path. But let's explore commodity culture. How did we get here? How do so many cultures produce 70% of their people that are disengaged? Well, it's because back in the days when management science was being formed in the 50s, it was all about stimulus response. Our brains are just like little behaviorist machines where we motivate them with a reward and boom, they'll jump through a hoop. And scientists were excited because it worked. It was based on goals and rewards. Like if we set a clear goal, people will jump through that hoop and it will happen. And it works temporarily. So it works. It's very good. But Paul Marciano, PhD, wrote this book. He's from Yale. He said, carrots and sticks don't work. This whole process of behavior rewards, it works temporarily, but has ever diminishing results over time. Long term, it doesn't work. It's an absolute failure. Why? Well, we'll explore and see what's going on in the brain. Well, one of the things it needs is increasing stimulus. The brain is always seeking something new and novel, and we'll see what drives the brain towards it. So it's a constant drive to get something new. And if it doesn't have a new carrot in front of it at all times, it gives up and becomes one of those people that doesn't care or gets angry at the system. Okay, it's treating people like they're a means to the end, not the end in themselves. And it ultimately destroys the whole process of valuing people. If we're treating people like a commodity, they don't feel like people anymore. Okay, so we all do this on varying levels, and we all have leaders in our system that don't know any better, that may have good intentions, but they end up using this system. So what does it do to our brains? Let's do some neuroscience and open up the brain and see what's happening inside. It's based on this molecule called dopamine. It's a neurotransmitter in our brain, and it's the desire molecule. It creates desire. It makes me want something, but not necessarily like something. So that's the thing. We can get things to jump through a hoop. We can get them to go to a goal. We can get them to grab onto that money. Yeah, I want that, but it doesn't really satisfy. Like Andre Agassi, he gets it and he goes, but I don't really even like this. It's desire and not value. I got to that goal of like that super project that I wanted to do, but I didn't feel valued. Andre Agassi got to the pinnacle of the world of winning, but it wasn't value. We got that money, we earned it, but it wasn't personal value. What we really want is personal value. And what this dopamine thing does is it actually downregulates. Think about it. Those addicts who get this, artificial drug that hops them up so much so that they desire it so much that they will keep going after that stimulus to their own demise. In fact, the brain is trying to push them away from it. It downregulates it. So they have to take more the next time and then more the next time because the brain keeps downregulating it so that they're taking toxic, dangerous amounts to get the same stimulation because there's no way to satisfy the desire because the desire isn't liking, it's just desire. And that's what dopamine ignites in our brains. So if you're just leading people down the path of desire, it's ultimately going to be a destructive use. In fact, this guy, Dr. Robert Lustig, wrote a whole book about the hacking of the American mind using this dopamine system. Our marketers are trying to hack people. Our leaders are trying to hack people, giving us little things we could jump through, little things on our phones that we can flip to, all sorts of things that are hacking our minds. When we don't know how to value ourselves and others, we turn to hacking, okay? And it's a simple hack. It's a very quick hack. It seeks that we use stuff to replace human valuing. And it's really easy to turn to because this is always by our side. We can always use it to hack our minds, isn't it? And our food is actually being designed so that we just can't stop eating. And you're at the end of eating all that stuff and you go like, I didn't even like that. I didn't even want all that. I just couldn't stop because that desire is being ignited. The electronics I just talked about, our entertainment, our kids we used to take us 10 years to watch the entire series of Friends. Now our kids can watch it in a weekend. Our marketing is hacking us to want, to desire, to buy. But we're never really satisfied because we're using this dopamine circuit in our brains that leads us to wanting, but never really liking. And that leads us with a lot of stress because there's never enough. The punishment and reward cycles are actually very stressful on the human psyche. The rewards are limited, so maybe I don't get mine. Maybe they got it and now it's gone, cup's empty. And you're not valuable. Ultimately, that's the pain that's striking you at your heart. It's like, I'm not valuable. This stuff around me is more valuable than me. This phone is more valuable. That goal is more valuable. I'm expendable. It's a very stressful place to be. It causes illness. In fact, 42.1% of all illnesses in the workplace are caused by this kind of mental stress. In fact, absenteeism is 1.5, or presenteeism rather. That's being present at work, but dealing with the stress actually slows you down 1.5 times more. It would have been better off that you went home and rested and recouped than sit there at work with that sort of disengaged posture, trying to recover at work. So it's a serious problem. So let's look a little bit deeper into the brain science. What does this look like? What does this do to our brains? So here's your neurocortex. That's your highest thinking, your most creative self, okay? It has all your ethics and values. Your moral self is up here. And then below that is your limbic system. And it's constantly scanning for survival. It's very emotional, and it's looking for survival. Diencephalon regulates your moods. Like, oh no, we're in a constant state of danger. Regulate that. And then the brainstem is just focused primarily on survival, keeping your blood sugar up and your heart beating. So it's about survival. So we go from brilliance to mere survival. And what drives that, according to Dr. Bruce Perry? Well, value, when you feel valued, you can operate in this highest level of your brain, your most creative, your most intelligent self. But when these negative feelings, when we start feeling threatened and our value is taken from us and stuff is more important, we go to alert, alarm, fear, terror, and that drives us brains down into these more base levels of just surviving. We're not thinking, we're not operating at ethical standards. We're just trying to get through the life. And that's what happens when the emotional state of your culture changes. The brains of all of your people downregulate. And not only that, but these are your intelligence levels. Your IQ of 120 or 100 is going to go down to 90, 80, 70, 60. And just like your IQ just drops in half when you're feeling stressed and feeling the negative pressure of not feeling valued. So that's what happens to our brain, and that gets driven down by dopamine and cortisol. When those two are pumping together, that means scary, run away, let's get to a safe goal somewhere else. Because ultimately, this whole system drives people to feeling no value, no value. So that's the commodity culture path. And so let's not take that path now. Let's look towards the more optimistic path. How do we take another turn? How do we create cultures that are based on VP? And what does that look like? So a valued people culture science looks like this. People are valued, of course. That's the fundamental premise of this. And this premise was actually started by a guy named Dr. Bowlby in the 1950s. And during management science, that 50s, these people took a different course. They said, you know what? It's not about behavioralism. It's not about getting people to jump through hoops. People are fundamentally wired by being valued. He was studying small children in the 1940s, 50s, and he noticed that the English moms and dads would bring little Johnny to hospital, and they would leave them there because that's the proper thing to do in the 50s in England, and they would leave Johnny to convalesce by himself. And then there'd be these other weird parents that actually would bring Johnny, and they would defy culture, and they would stay there with Johnny. But that Johnny thrived. He got better faster. His health was better. He was in a better mood. All his vitals were better. So that got him to think, as a hypothesis, maybe this valuing people is really the core of wiring people, not the behavioralism that the rest of the science is pursuing. So that opened up this whole study of attachment, of valuing people. Attachment is what scientists call it. Attachment in adulthood. And people write books and study how it is in the workplace and in adult. I mean, think about it. When you reach adolescence, are you less concerned about connection? No, adolescents become super focused on connecting with their peers. Okay, so it becomes hyper important for them. And as we get older, that still exists. And so the brain is attuned by valuing from children through adulthood. We are born and nurtured in value. Without it, we die. Babies actually die without nurturing. And as adults, we wither without nurturing and without valuing. Okay? So leaders can create this whole environment of being valued. I was not feeling that when my manager didn't create this environment of like, hey, we're so glad you're here. You're so important to this system. You're so important to who we are. And in fact, you're one of the reasons why we're doing this is just to be with you. Okay. And what does that create in our brains? Well, serotonin is the value on the brain. Okay. What does valuing on the brain look like? It looks like the release of serotonin. Serotonin is the master modulator. Okay. It gives us this sensation of safety, value, pleasure. Okay. But it's also with a combination, not just desire, but satisfaction. That's why everyone goes immediately, yeah, I know what that feels like. I know what serotonin feels like on my brain. And what's more, when we call it this, there's this longevity study that shows what happens when serotonin is on the brain. They identified subjects from the 1920s all the way up until the present day. And these subjects had great relationships. That was the foundation that they saw. And they saw when they had great relationships, serotonin was being released. And then all of their indicators were positive. They had really good financial lives. They had really good personal health. They had really good families. They had really good marriages. Everything on all measurable levels, these people were successful and thriving because they had that foundation of being valued. And then the serotonin was released and they went off to thriving as human beings. Okay? So it's a signal to thrive. Serotonin upregulates everything and says, hey, time to go, time to live, time to dial everything up. In fact, it's called the master modulator by Dr. Hart, PhD. She says it actually goes into the special receptors on cells and affects them for the long term. It's not a short term effect. It doesn't happen as fast as dopamine. That's why people don't use it to hack as much. But once it settles in and you feel this whole culture and this whole vibe around you of being valued, it will actually say, be more healthy, be more energetic, you work better. It'll even modulate your dopamine. Don't be in control. We're in control. And it will start changing all of the systems, your heart, how your heart functions, how your lung functions, how your mitochondria functions, everything in your system. And we'll see how it is affected by serotonin. Oxytocin is upregulated by serotonin. It's the trust hormone. And this guy, Dr. Paul Zak, he's an economist. He wanted to know what makes business work. And you guessed it, successful relationships, trusting business relationships. It's all about these valuing relationships that is the foundation of any successful economy. This is what he had to say. This is what the economist had to say. There are no shortcuts or substitutes. Success is great, but no amount of money, achievement, or fame. Money, achievement, and fame are not the foundations of economy, according to him, will satisfy our need for human attachment. That human attachment, that valuing, that's what he's at the core of every economy, according to this economist. What else does it release? Well, into the serotonin situation where we're being master modulated, endocannabinoids and endogenous opioids get released. Yay! That's the thing that makes you feel happy. That's the thing that says, I like this. Because this is pot and this is opioids. But we have receptors for those in our brains, but they have to be at the right amounts, and they have to be from your brain, not from pills. And when your brain says that, it lowers your pain threshold, it upregulates your pleasure, and it makes you happy, and it makes you more resilient. It pushes you through life. Okay? So serotonin makes this work better. And it makes this other thing worse. Now, this guy, he's another famous neuroscience scientist. His name is Stephen Porges. He's identified the social connection circuit. It's your 10th cranial nerve, the vagus nerve. It's the nerve that innervates, which is a fancy word for connects and energizes all of your organs. Nothing like the nerve that tells your heart start beating, your lungs start breathing. That sounds important. Okay? It energizes your body and tells it to go. And when, under what context? When you feel valued. Okay? So the chemicals in your body, the electrical system of your body, the brain of your body are all upregulated. You get this positive, energetic feeling under this state when you feel valued. So do you think that affects your brain? Instead of being pushed down by these negative forces, serotonin actually upregulates your brain so that you stay up in this calm, valued state in your most intelligent, healthy self. And all of these parts of your brain are functioning together as a unified whole for your success and for the success and valuing of those around you. Sounds like a win-win, right? It is. In fact, if you have a system that you're designing around goals and commodity culture, serotonin is going to be minimized. Okay, it's this small circle. And dopamine is the main driver of your culture. Then what happens over time is they both lose. It's a lose-lose system. Dopamine will cannibalize. Remember, it downregulates. So serotonin is not in charge, so it can't help the dopamine system. But if we base our culture on the serotonin driver, dopamine is going to exist. You can still drive people towards goals. That becomes a good thing within the context of being valued. And what happens when we push that forward? Well, they both grow. They grow in healthy ways. And we're going to see what it does to businesses. Because creating VP culture makes people feel valued. And that value snowballs into great business outcomes, thriving people, healthy connections. And I get a lot of this is for the cynics. I get the cynical approach to, oh, that's nice neuroscience and psychology, but this is business, Randall. This is a dog-eat-dog world. This isn't about feeling good. This is about making money. Bank. Well, let's look at business. Let's take this business, which obviously this is Southwest Airlines. They have these little hearts on their plane, but it's not just a painting on a plane or a logo. It's a serious cultural movement. If you've studied the culture of Southwest Airlines, you know they're committed to valuing people above all else. It's not just a sideline. It's the number one thing in their culture. And the other thing that's good about this is a business case because they entered the airline business. They weren't like Tesla, like, hey, we're the first guy in the electric car business. No, they entered into a competitive field with less capitalization in a time that the airlines didn't allow them to fly point to point, which is the most efficient way. I mean, point to hub where you switch planes in Chicago and then you fly on to the next thing. That's the most efficient way. They had to fly point to point, which is 20% less efficient. And then because they had to compete, they had to lower their prices. So they get less money for what they're doing with less capitalization in a less efficient model. And the only differentiator they have is this culture focused on valuing people. So let's see how they did in the last 60 years. Southwest Airlines. They had 50 years of profitability. And you're like, yeah, they're in airlines. What do you expect? No, the airline industry has posted a net loss in the last 50 years. It's that margins are so razor thin that most of them never post a profit, let alone every single year for 50 years. That's incredible. More stock value than all others in the industry, more productivity, more productive employees, the lowest turnover, almost no layoffs, the highest safety records, the highest satisfaction record, and the largest airlines in the United States. Not bad for the past 50 years. They are the leading airlines in the past 50 years. You think, well, Randall, maybe that's just what you chose to think about this situation. Okay, well, let's ask their CEO. What drove your company, Herb Kelleher, for the past 50 years? For those who think leading with love is simply soft management, review the record of Southwest Airlines over the last 50 years. And from these results, it can factually and logically be computed that if you seek long and continued success for your business organization, treat your people as family and lead with love. Herb Kelleher, one of the most successful CEOs ever, who built one of the strongest cultures ever. You think, well, maybe he was just an outlier. Maybe he just, I don't know, whatever it was. Well, let's look at this guy. This is Bill Campbell. You probably never heard of him. His nickname is the $1 trillion coach. Why? Well, Bill, he coached a few guys that you probably never heard of: Jeff Bezos, Steve Jobs, Eric Schmidt, CEO of Google. These little guys. He was their executive coach. Over $1 trillion worth of assets in these companies. And he was their coach, their business coach. And what was the key thing that he taught these business leaders? Value people. In fact, there's stories of Bill, like he treated everybody with value. Like he could be on the field coaching powder puff 9-year-old football team, and he'd get a call and like, look, it's Steve Jobs calling me up. Boop, voicemail. Those 9-year-old girls were important to him at that time. He was with them. He was present. And that was a lesson that each one of those leaders took to their businesses. Okay. And then there's more. Let's look. These are statistics and studies based in the business world. Okay. Gallup did some research, and what happens to the business indicators when you have a whole team of thriving people? Well, what do you think? Lower turnover, fewer safety, fewer defects, higher productivity, higher profits, and 11% better stock value. So if you think, oh, it's all about money, well, you better pay attention to this valuing people strategy, because it is the leading strategy for greater efficiency. And let me remind you, during those 50, 60 years that Southwest was thriving and growing, there were 77 airlines that filed for bankruptcy during that time. So if you're in an industry that margins are razor thin, or there's a lot of competition, this could be the differentiator that makes the difference. A VP culture. So is there a business case for this? There sure is. So, most of the people I'm talking to are HR people or CEOs or leaders that are really excited about culture. So I've been preaching to the choir already, but I'm giving you tools so that you can excite other people about this. You can inspire others about this. So how do we do this, Randall? Give us more details. So there are some salient details, because a lot of times I talk to these excited people and I'm like, so what's your plan? And they're like, I don't have one. So what I'm trying to give you is a specific blueprint. Okay. You need a target culture. You need to say, I've got it written down of how to build this culture. So get out your pens and pencils, because we're going to give you some scientific ways to build this culture, because the path to hell is paved with people with good intentions. Everybody that I've worked with, I think it had good intentions. They just didn't know how to do some of these things. So it's important that you're leaders, because culture is shaped by leaders. People leave leaders. They don't leave companies. Okay. They leave their supervisor. Okay, your supervisor needs to know how to build VP culture. And what does that mean? First of all, they need to focus on valuing people. Every leader needs to have that one singular focus: value people. How do I do that? You need to have three areas dialed in as a leader. You need to be able to care for people in the past, the present, and the future. Personality science is a discipline that focuses on who people were in the past and caring for them like this. Emotional science engages with people in the present. Say, I connect with you using this fundamental language called emotions in the present. Not just words, but we feel connected right now. Value science is creating a future of hope and casting a whole vision for how we're going to live in the future. Who you are in the future is going to be cared for as well. So past, present, future. Let's dive into the first scientific discipline, personality science. Okay, all of these things are driven by sciences because I wanted methodologies that have been proven scientifically, have been studied over years. Okay, so again, this is a 3-hour seminar that we do for personality science. So you're getting like a 2-minute slice of this. Okay, why is this important? Because Gallup has done studies that people who feel engaged and led to their strengths, your personality strengths, feel 70% more engaged. Okay, so 70% of the foundation, if your leaders can get this, you're 70% of the way there. Okay, again, it's based on 30 years of research. It's one of the most widely studied. Personality science is one of the most widely studied social psychologies. Okay, it's a law of psychology. There are very few other laws of psychology when you read the literature. This is the number one, the most reliable. It has an R value of zero point 0.5, which is off the scales. Okay, and it works against, again, all ethnicities, all genders, all ages. So there's this kind of testing doesn't discriminate against anyone. It's very unifying. So we've discovered the DNA of personality. Imagine that. Your leaders can look at somebody, give them a test, interact with them, and go, this is who this person is. And then that person can start to feel known. That leader knows how to treat me, who I am. They lead me to my strengths. They don't lead me to who I'm not. So many of my leaders could see what I wasn't, and they would lead me to that. You stink at this. You stink at that. And, it's like, my personality is never going to be that. But my personality is this. Lead me to that. And this is what this whole study empowers your leaders to do. Okay, we mentioned the Gallup leadership studies showing how important that leading people to their strengths is. People, ironically, when I give these personality tests, they have no clue as to who they are. They don't even know their own DNA. In fact, HR leaders use these tests usually to keep people out of jobs. Like people go, oh, I want that job. And then they give them the test and like, you would hate this job. So, people don't know themselves. So this helps people to discover themselves, to lead themselves to what they really like and are. So here's the quiz that you could give, think in the back of your mind. How many of my leaders, my senior leaders in my organization, can name the 5 factors of personality? Write that down. Do your top leaders can name off the top of their head what are the 5 factors of personality and can name those off the top of their head quickly? If they can't, this is a fundamental foundational area of science that your culture needs to start with immediately. It takes some investment, but it's very didactic and we can educate people on this, okay? So it gives you these superpowers. It starts to show people that you could accept differences as good. If you see somebody deficient in something, well, they're going to have a strength somewhere else. Find the strength. Don't camp out on their deficiencies. And if you've got some strengths, know that you got some weaknesses that other person is going to fill in. So it starts to see differences as good, not just like, oh, if you're not me, then you're no good. It helps us predict perception. So if you go into that meeting and you say, hey, we've got a new software launch, and you know the personalities of your team, you can say, these 3 are going to perceive this as a negative event. New software, scary. And these 2 over here are going to be like, oh, new software, great. Why? Why is the perception different for the same fact? Because they're different people, different personalities will perceive the information. Their brains have already been tuned that new things are bad. New things are great, pre-programmed, and they can't change it over time. Okay, so that allows you to predict behavior. Is that person who is going to perceive the software as being bad going to be the person that you give the team lead to for the new software development? Maybe not, but maybe that person is really good at learning rules and sticking to rules. So I need that person. So I need that bit of their behavior that sticks to rules really well because we got some software that needs to be followed in a process and needs to be followed. And this person that's excited about new things, maybe we partner them together. And the excitement part works with the fastidious full rule following part, and they work together and they thrive. You see how that you could predict behaviors as a leader and come up with great solutions? And what does that lead to? 70% more engagement, 70% down the pathway by establishing personality science. So think about this. I often talk to the introverts in the crowd. I said, introverts, and then I asked them to type me in the chat if they're out there. And I said, do extroverts treat you like you're an extrovert? And universally all the introverts like, yes, they all treat us like we're broken extroverts. No, we're introverts. We have a silent power. And I, read Susan Cain's book on the secret power of introverts. And I'm an extrovert, and I thought my wife was a broken extrovert. And like every time I turn a page, I'm like, I'm so sorry. You're so powerful. You're so beautiful. And you start to learn the goodness of the superpowers of the introvert. That's what every leader needs to learn is the superpowers of each personality. How does that affect us? So when we are led to our personalities, we thrive. We feel valued. So this is the foundation. If you can't fit together the diversity of personalities into a coherent whole, if you're treating everybody like they're a broken version of you, if they're not like you, boy, that kind of leadership is going to destroy. And that's exactly what I've experienced through my life is every leader thinks everyone should be like me. No, you need to be yourself and you need to be led to yourself and your own strengths. So that's personality science. Emotional science in the current time. Okay, what does that look like? How do we connect in the present? Now, Amy Edmondson is a Harvard researcher, and she did study after study about it, and she found emotionally safe teams in the Boston areas in the medical field. And she said, I have got this test, and I can see that there are 3 emotionally safe teams over here that know emotional science well, and these 2 over here that don't really got it going on. They're emotionally not safe. There's emotional disconnection going on in these teams, and I'm going to study them to see how effective their outcomes. Does it matter how they feel in the medical field? Well, it turned out it did. The emotionally safe teams, the ones that got emotional science and could do it well, they had higher quality outcomes, they had less fatal errors, they had less turnover. Those teams were thriving. And the teams that had the emotionally unsafe processes and leaders, of course, not only were they less effective, they were even afraid to report accurately in her research. She had to go back and redo her research with the emotionally unsafe teams because they would always be lying about their things because it wasn't safe to say the truth. Okay, so it's the number one factor for effective teams. Google did research that backed this up called in Project Aristotle. You can Google that. And they found that emotional safety, psychological safety, they call it, emotional science is the number one factor, more than education, more than big dreams, more than all those different factors combined. Emotional safety, number one factor for effective teams. And most of us were taught in by early management to just banish emotions. That's something you should just leave at home, okay? But here's the disconnect. If you're all smiley, like I'm Mr. Smiley Man, it's not about nice. It's about emotional science. Okay. You might show up and be nice, but you're really feeling all this behind, and people can tell. You can't hide it. Okay. It's very interesting when we do. If scientists have discovered that somebody who has a stroke and they can't move their facial muscles, if you suddenly tell them a funny joke, they light up and they can move all their facial muscles, laugh out loud, because genuine emotions are innervated again by a different cranial nerve. The one that died is the one that is, you got to think about how to fake an emotion. Okay, that when you're a 4-year-old, you learn how to smile for the camera, and it's kind of, but it's the fake emotions that die in a stroke. But the real emotions, they're still there. Those nerves still live. So you can't fake it. Okay, you have to deal with it. And if it's not dealt with well, you'll end up with a team that's ineffective, according to Amy Edmondson. So how do we do this? How do we correct? What kind of emotional science can we use to teach people to do this emotional stuff well? Well, I found this guy, Stephen Hayes. He's written this book, A Liberated Mind, and developed a system called ACT that's been studied in the workplace for over 30 years. Okay, and it's not about banishing emotions. It's a whole other process. Okay, it's been studied for 30 years. It's about gaining perspective on your emotions, not banishing them. Perspective, intelligence, even. Okay, we're not going to be reactive. We're not going to be slaves like, oh, we're all going to be emotional and follow our emotional impulses. No, we'll be intelligent about our emotions. We'll find the wisdom from our emotions, but we're not going to be led around and controlled by them. We're going to have freedom because we know identify and work with our emotions in a very mature, operating in a present kind of way. So here's some tools. Again, 3-hour workshop boiled down into 5 seconds. You need to have this kind of exercise. So Steve Hayes has this hands exercise because emotions are basically boiled down to 2 things, like in this exercise. On the one hand, it's your thought processes. Like let's say your boss sends you an email that says, "Come to my office," and you read it like that in your mind. Come to my office. thought is, this is going to be bad. So that's the thought process. And then what does your body do? So the second hand, on the other hand, the feeling is your body's going, your heart is beating, you start to breathe, your stomach starts to go, ugh, and those two together make the emotion called fear. And you have no perspective. It's up in your face. It's controlling you, and you're getting reactive. And you're like, I'm going to blame my boss. He didn't give me enough time. I'm going to blame the vendor. They didn't get it done on time. I'm going to blame production. They didn't, blah, blah, blah. Ah. Or you can gain a little perspective and go, maybe it's nothing. I mean, he just wants to talk to me. And then my body is really feeling overwhelmed. And I just need to give myself a second to collect myself, calm down. And then I'll go into his office, and you go in, and he's like, oh, I've got some tickets for the, oh, you're upset, aren't you? I'm sorry, I shouldn't have written that email like that. But I just have some tickets for the play. I couldn't go myself and thought you'd enjoy that. So gaining perspective on our emotional selves is what helps us. So I like to point out to people real quick, this is just a snippet exercise, this is kind of fun, that you don't have complete control of your thoughts. A lot of our thought processes are autonomic. So don't think you have control, but you do have perspective. So here's one thing that I used to show, a quick exercise, like, so for the next 20 seconds, don't think at all. Ready? See if you can control your thoughts for 20 seconds. Just 20 seconds. Go. So did anyone think no thoughts? Usually I have one guru that does it, and like I was they're able to do it, but 99% of people, I had a million thoughts in those 20 seconds. I couldn't tell my brain to shut off. It was just like going all the time. That's because your autonomic system is telling you what's important and boiling those thoughts up into your brain. You don't have complete control over that. So what you're doing is you can hope to have perspective on that rather than complete control. And then people say, oh, I can completely control my body from reacting emotionally. Can we now? So here's another exercise that helps people realize how much control they have over their physical body and how much their autonomic system takes control. So I ask people to stand on one foot like I'm doing now. And you can see I'm trying to balance. I'm up on my toes. And do I have to use I can talk about this, but what's my body doing for me in the background? My autonomic system is balancing me. It's using my vestibular system in my head, and then it's using muscles. I don't have to think, little toe, come on, little toe, big toe now. Oh, blood down there, blood down there. No, your body does all of that for you. It takes care of that. In the same way, your emotional reaction, when I saw that, oh no, my boss sent me an email. Your body just takes over an autopilot. But I can have perspective on that. So it's the wise leader that can have perspective on his thoughts, perspective on his emotions, and bring that into the leadership sphere. Because if I try to control all that and control all the people from having emotions, it ends up looking like that 50-year-old that I worked with at Greece who couldn't have an emotional conversation with a 20-year-old. Okay? We want you to be able to go and say, hey, we missed the deadline. We're all feeling stressed here, aren't we? Let's create a little space for each other. It's going to be okay. We're going to get over this. What's it like for us to do in this stressful situation? Okay, we need to take 5 and I'll calm down. Okay, we'll do that. And then how do we, ethically, morally bootstrap it from here? Well, we do this. We tell the client that we're behind. We tell all these supervisors that we're behind. We get everything back in line and tell them what our new plan is. That sounds responsible. That sounds like us. Let's move in that direction. Okay. So acceptance gives us that freedom to accept the emotion rather than like, let's hide, let's run, let's lie. That's what the unemotional supervisors did. In fact, get this, studies show that the most successful surgeons, the most successful engineers, the most successful athletes, the most successful financial traders do this. They have high emotional intelligence. Why? Because there's wisdom in their emotional selves. It's not like they're being reactive, but they've trained themselves so well over time that their gut and their body just knows what the right path is to take. And when they can listen to that, they're more successful surgeons, they're more successful engineers, they're more successful. So this isn't just woo-woo science of like, oh, isn't that nice? We got our emotions under control. No, this is a leading indicator of the most successful executives and leaders in the world. Okay, It's the number one factor for team effectiveness. Remember that, okay? According to Google, according to studies, if you got emotional science, people are going to start to feel valued on your team. You're going to value yourself. You're going to value your customers. People are going to get you, and you're going to get them. There's going to be positive connection in the present. Okay, so moving along. I'm going to rip through this stuff. Again, we spend 3 weeks, a 3-hour seminar on each one of these things, and we're ripping through it in 5 minutes each just to give you a snapshot of what this could look like for your team. Value science, what does that look like? Again, focuses your team on the future. And value science is, again, based on ACT and logotherapy, because this is something that has been studied over the past 30, 40 years. It's the future of valuing people, meaning you're focusing on what does my future landscape look like? What does the reality look like? Where are we really headed? Are we really headed to a goal, or are we really headed to values? Meaning values is the set of ideas that values people. Okay, goals could be like, I want to move this over here. Goal finished. Were there any people involved? Well, I moved it. Okay, but goals lead to stuff, values lead to people. Okay, so you want to create a future of values. Okay, values lead to people forever. Like, we never get to the end of a value. A goal is like, oh, we got there. Like when COVID hit, you probably had a bunch of goals that you had to move aside, but hopefully you kept treating your people with the same values over time. Okay, when valuing people becomes your vision, you will thrive. Okay, people adopt this, like, I know where we're going, and it's about values. It's not just about goals. Goals are in there, but they're not the primary focus. Values are the place where we're going. Okay, finance follows valuing people. Okay, get this. This is a little bit of a disruptive thought here. Okay, look at all the research that we've been talking about so far. When valuing people becomes your foremost goal, the finance follows it. It's the trailing indicator. When you put finance first, you got commodity culture, and the value and the distance between the two increases, and both indicators actually diminish over time. A little bit counterintuitive, but that's the way it works. Okay. Southwest Airlines tried to copy, or United tried to copy. They did a little side experiment. Like, hey, let's copy Southwest Airlines. They're obviously the most successful airlines. Let's copy all their business processes, their goals, but they didn't copy their values. So United was never able to duplicate the Southwest magic because they were duplicating their values. The values is what drove Southwest to their success. Here are 3 things that we get from Viktor Frankel. And his analysis of values is very astute. And this is part of what we do. We take people through this value stream. Okay, we have these creational values, and that's where most organizations live. Okay, we create widget X with excellence and quality. And don't get me wrong, you need to know what you're making, what product or service you're making, and you want to have some values around that. We want to make the best of this, right? And like Starbucks, they create a great cup of coffee. But they ask themselves, well, why do we create the great cup of coffee? Because of experiential values. So they ask the question, why? Why the great cup of coffee? Because we want people to feel a home away from home, a place where they feel valued. Okay? So they wanted to create this experience. But let me tell you something, there's a step higher. The truly great leaders ask, why do I create this experience for people? Because they have ultimate values. They ask one more question, why? Because people are worth it. People are the pinnacle of every organization. We work with people, for people, to serve people. I bring myself, I bring others, and we all work together to create this ultimate value that we as human beings are worth doing this organization together with, for those people over there, that it's all about people. And when people have this vision of the ultimate values, not just creational values, but that it leads to people, that's why we're lining up. That taps into something that's intrinsic in every individual. I want to go that way. The true leader realizes where people really are going. And this is Viktor Frankel. He was a concentration camp victim. And he had his manuscript when he entered the concentration camp. This was his creational values. They took it and burned it. Did he have a great experience in the concentration camp? No. So no shoes, wintertime, cold, bad food, bad experience, everything horrible. They were trying to create the most miserable experience possible for these people. But he realized there was one thing they could not take from him, which was the ultimate value. And that's what allowed him to unpack all of this, because everything was taken from him. And what remained was this idea. He said this: for the first time in my life, I saw the truth as it was set in song by so many poets and proclaimed as the final wisdom by so many thinkers, that the truth, that love, that being valued is the ultimate and highest value to which man can aspire. Then I grasped the meaning of the greatest secret that human poetry, thought, belief have to impart, was that salvation of man is through love and in love. That valuing people is the one value that can never be taken from us, and it is our highest value. When people realize that you're leading them to that highest pinnacle, you don't have to cajole them. They will follow because they realize in their own hearts you've just revealed where they want to go. You're keeping them focused on where I already want to go. Their future is painted in a place where they feel valued and they get to value others. That's the place where everyone wants to go. So the idea is we teach your leadership these three sciences in seminars and with materials, didactic materials over time. They review it again and again, but it has to turn from science into what I call art, the art of VP culture, so that you have these leaders in your organization that are making your culture, that are valuing people, that are like, you know, that guy that I met who was my leader in that business, I have spent my whole life trying to be like them. That woman who showed me how to be valued and showed me how to do this leadership style, I have translated that into the rest of my life. It changed my world, changed my life. That's what we want. We want people to be virtuosos of these kind of techniques so that when they do them, they're natural. And when people experience them, they feel valued. Okay. And Andre Agassi figured this out later in his life. He realized, I'm not playing for myself. I'm playing for you, the audience. Enjoy my tennis. And then he enjoyed it more. Even though he was having pain in his joints, he went out and became number one again. And then he used his finances to start charter schools in Las Vegas where he lived. So he wrote to his son, he said, son, never forget that this whole life experience is about valuing people. I want you to know that. That's what my life is about now. Such a change from that winning changes nothing. And then I got to tell my daughter, hey, whether you're an artist or whether you do social work or whatever you do, you can value people and nobody can take that from you. And that becomes the pinnacle of what your life is about. When valuing people becomes your vision, you live victorious. She joined the Missouri National Guard and is getting a master's degree in social work, not because she thinks, oh, I'll enjoy that more. She wants to connect with people and she knows she's going to value people in whatever she does. And that makes her victorious in life. And I'll leave you with this one letter to Southwest Airlines from a couple that experienced some exceptional experience. He says, I want to comment, dear Southwest Airlines, I want to comment and gratefully acknowledge the fine service that my husband and I recently received on one of your planes. My husband returned from Norfolk, Virginia after being deployed in Iraq for 1 year. Our flight home from Baltimore to Long Island was a last leg of a long journey for him. The flight became an unforgettable, beautiful memory for us both. Your employee, a flight attendant named Sandra, took the time and effort not only to thank my husband for his service, but also asked everyone on the plane to do the same by allowing us to exit the plane, by allowing us to get off first. And as we began to exit, the passengers clapped, thanked, and congratulated us. We both began crying during Sandra's detailed announcement about my husband's service and our life together over the past year. It was such a relief to feel that someone appreciated our sacrifice that we and our children have made. And as touched as we were as what went on inside the plane, we were floored to find that your employees outside the gate were waiting to present my husband with a bottle of champagne. And I was extremely touched when one of them turned to me and said, let me thank you for what must have been a difficult experience with you alone with your kids over the past year. As we entered the gate area, every person waiting stood and applauded the safe return of a man that they had never met, all because of Sandra's valuing actions. Please extend our greatest appreciation for Sandra's creation of our treasured memory, which will last a lifetime. Customers, Deborah and Peter Ellison. So that's what we want to create. So what would we say back in these meetings? I hope I encouraged you and empowered you with inspiring stories, some business cases, what could be in your culture in the next year, in the next time to come, and to give you tools to create VP culture. So I encourage you to continue to connect with me over time, to send me emails, to connect with me over LinkedIn. You can go to vpculture.com/go, and I've got a workbook that I'd love to send you in digital form so you can see what's going on. You can also connect with us, and we'll be sending out PDFs that are examples of leadership training exercise and videos that will be coming like this one in the future. So thanks for joining me over this past hour. I hope that we met your expectations. And if you've got any questions, please connect with me offline and message me, and I'd love to connect with you. So thanks very much, and we'll end our webinar there. So